Welcome to the Jacksonville First Seventh-day Adventist Church podcast, where we listen, learn, and love together. Our speaker today is Pastor Jonathan Pinato.
What we want to do in this sermon is we're going to explore different aspects of masculinity. The first part of this sermon will be surveying images of masculinity. So when I say masculine, what image comes to your mind? What person comes to your mind? So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my views of masculinity, or what, when you say the word masculine, what comes to mind. And so when someone says masculine, I think of a truck. Does anybody else think of a truck when they think masculine? All right, I'm driving a little Toyota Corolla, and it's a little commuter car, right? I don't view that as a masculine car. I'm just speaking about me. All right, anybody else in the room? Amen? No? All right, a truck, right? A truck is a masculine thing, and if it's diesel, even more masculine. Isn't that right? Okay, all right. And if it has these loud mufflers on the back, even more masculine, all right? And if there's dirt on there, if there's a mountain scene in the back, even more masculine, all right? That's just me, all right? A motorcycle. Anybody? Amen. Motorcycle? Yeah, all right. Harley Davidson. I don't like motorcycles personally. I've ridden on a few. I don't know how to ride a motorcycle, but I've ridden as a passenger in the back of a motorcycle, which isn't a very masculine thing to do, is it? No. And about the point that they hit 40 miles an hour, I get scared and I feel I'm going to fly off of that thing. And so I say, stop, get me off of this thing, all right? But my brother-in-law has a motorcycle, so I guess he's maybe a little more masculine, all right? There, anyways. Hunting, right? And doesn't that say masculinity? And we're up in the tree and we have a bow and arrow. Some people are shaking their heads. No, that's all right. This is good. Images of masculinity. This is just what I'm talking about. A beard. Come on, is a beard masculine or what? Right? Especially, those full beards, not those little beards that, they don't connect, that there's a patch in there. No, a full beard, right? In hands, look at that guy working at that tool station or whatever, and he has tools in his hand, right? His arms are hairy. That's masculine, right? Images of masculinity. Okay, all right. Bald heads, too. I was actually thinking about that. Bald head. A bald head and a beard. Isn't that masculine? I'm going to try that out one of these days because I'm losing my hair. I told my wife I'm going to shave my head and grow out my beard, and maybe I'll look tougher. I don't know, more masculine. Now, what's interesting is that images of masculinity are informed by culture. And so I'm going to show you a few slides here of what perhaps masculinity may look in white Caucasian culture, what masculinity may look like in an African-American context, and then my personal context, I'm going to show you what masculinity looks in a Hispanic context. And I don't want you to laugh when I show you the pictures, okay? My apologies if anyone's from Asia. I don't have any examples of what masculinity may look from Asia or from the Middle East. But what's interesting is I think that there's some common elements. Even though we have different views of what masculinity looks like, I think there may be some common elements throughout the different cultures of what constitutes masculinity. I've also noticed that there's a difference with demographic and age group when it comes to masculinity. For example, I've noticed, I was speaking with someone the other day, and they were sharing when I think of masculine individuals, I'm actually thinking of people in the past. I mean, that's just for me. And what I noticed is that I look up to people who are older than me. I view them as masculine. But then this individual was sharing, people that in the current day who have a depiction of masculinity. And when I look at those people, I don't think they're masculine because they're like my age, or some of them are even younger. And so I don't view them as masculinity. So I think masculinity has to do with demographics, older or current. It also has to do with an era. And I want to trace masculinity in the ancient world. And it's interesting because the men back in the days, they used to wear togas. And that just doesn't feel very masculine to me. They either wore togas or they wore nothing at all. And we'll show some pictures of that. Apologize for that ahead of time for the nudes. But we're just going to, explore the ancient world there. So here we go. This is a place called Loggia in Florence, Italy. And so it's like a covered, I don't know what that is, like, what would you call that? Not like a porch, but it's like a covered area. It used to be a market. That's probably what it used to be. It used to be a covered market. But now they have different sculptures there depicting different men and different events in the ancient world, in the Greek world and in the Roman world. And we're going to zoom in here on some of these images. And again, I apologize because we're going to have some nudes in there. It's just hard. That's just what they did back in those days. All right. Here we have Perseus, right? But we have his sword right there covering his... all right, anyways. All right, so we have Perseus. He's thick. Have you noticed that? Now, this is an ancient sculpture, and he's thick. And Perseus is the one who beheaded Medusa, and he has her head in his hands with things, coming out of here. Good thing the kids are in children's or kids zone today, right? Okay, all right. That's Medusa's head that he's holding. He's masculine. He's thick, all right, and then that's her body underneath that he's just trampled. Here's another one, Hercules. Now, I just keep common trends of masculinity from the ancient world. Here, look at Hercules. He's thick, isn't he? He's thick, and he always is depicted with a club in his hand. And I think that's Caucasus there, and you guess what he's going to do with that club? To that head. Masculinity. Look at his arms. Look at his chest. And if you go to the back side as well, I mean, his back is it's thick. Here's another picture of Hercules as well. Look at those arms. And here he's taking down the monitor. So these are images of masculinity from the ancient world that continue even today. Here's another one from the Vatican Museum in Rome. This is Laocoon and his two sons. And I don't necessarily know the story behind Laocoon, but I think what happened is that one of the gods sent a snake to attack him. And so you see him there wrestling with the snake. The snake is biting him here on the hip. Part of the sculpture is broken, and so there's a snake that there should be another snake by the head of his son here. But look at Laocoon. Look at how thick he is. Look at those muscles. Look at those arms, right? And these are his sons that are younger than him. So what's interesting is that the men in ancient days were depicted as thick, whereas the children or the young men were depicted as thin. Do you see that? A difference between or an idea of masculinity versus a lack of masculinity. Not just in the sculptures, but we also see it in the paintings, the ancient paintings of days gone by. This painting here is entitled The Massacre of the Innocents. And so, sometimes we think that we're violent today in our society. They were violent back then too. There's actually a sculpture that's called The Rape of the Sabaeans. And it's a beautiful sculpture, but it's a very ugly sculpture as well because of the violence that is depicted in there. This one's called The Massacre of the Innocents by the painter Daniel de Volterra. And one of the things that you'll notice here, this man is wrestling this other man here. And just, again, look how they were painted, just very thick. Here in the back, there's a man, I think, doing something with a baby, killing a baby. I saw another one here. Yeah, another one on this side holding the baby. Sometimes, like I said, mentioned even scenes of rape were depicted on there. But this is the idea of masculinity. Now, this is Greece and this is Rome. Now, let's go to Egypt. Egypt depicted their individuals a little bit differently. For example, I'm going to ask you that guy there to the left that's bald. Or I should have said guy. Is that a guy or is that a man or is that a woman? All right, so this is interesting, right? All right, we just looked at this masculine-filled scenes from Greece and Rome. Now we go to Egypt, and the Egyptians tended to sculpt their men androgynously. In other words, we kind of can't really tell. In fact, you'll notice that Egyptians used to shave themselves, whereas the Greeks and the Romans, they had the big beard. In fact, Egyptian men, especially those of the upper classes and of the royal classes, accustomed to using eye makeup or cosmetics. They would use eyeliner, black eyeliner around their eyes. They would even use eyeshadow above their eyes of the color of green or so to highlight their eyes. Notice I want to call it, I think that is a pharaoh there with the headset there. Is that a man or a woman? How many say, text your poll, text it to, how many say a man? How many say that's a man? Raise your arm, or raise your hand. Yeah, how many say that's a man? All right, how many of you say it's a woman? Raise your arm. Okay, that's a woman. That's a woman. Yeah, and that's actually the Queen Hatshepsut. And archaeologists believe that's another sculpture of her. She actually put on a fake beard to just this androgynous nature that they had in Egypt. Some archaeologists actually believe that she was the woman, the princess, the daughter of the Pharaoh who took Moses out of the river, and she indeed was Pharaoh. But she placed a little beard there on her. She's very famous. She has a tomb in Egypt in the Valley of the Kings, and this is Hatshepsut's tomb. there in the Valley of the Kings. So you saw a little bit of difference, right? Images of masculinity with the different cultures, different times. All right, so now we're going to go into 1950s. Help me out here. Anybody who was alive in the 1950s, let me know yes or no. Images of masculinity, 1950s. Images of masculinity? Yes, Marlon Brando, Clint Eastwood, especially with that beard. Notice they got beards, right? And who's that other guy? James Dean and John Wayne. Grit, people with grit. Masculine, amen? Yes or no? Are there any other, from the 1950s, are there any other images of masculinity that you remember from the 1950s? And I'm talking about white Caucasian images of masculinity. Frontiersmen, right? I mean, that's kind of how America was founded, right? In the Wild West and the frontier and expanding and masculinity. All right, no other names of masculinity from the 1950s? All right, let's come up to my day. All right, come on. All right, this image here, this page or this slide is just oozing testosterone. Come on, this is macho right here. That's what I grew up with. I mean, I just look at that image and I'm pumped. I'm ready to go. Any other man? Can I get a witness? Come on. Have you seen those Chuck Norris memes? Yeah, Chuck Norris memes. This is one of my favorites. Maybe it's a little irreverent, but it says Jesus can walk on water. Jesus can walk on water, but Chuck Norris can swim through dry land. No, I don't know. It's just so tough, right? All right, anyways, all right, let's move on here. I asked a few other individuals moving here to African-American men. Does this speak masculinity, African-American men? Give me an amen here. I learned, something new. Well, you got Jackie Robinson, right? We got James Earl Jones. I mean, he just has that voice, right? And it's just an incredible voice. And then let me see here. There's some people I didn't know on there, like Medgar Evers. Anybody recognize Medgar Evers? I didn't know who Medgar Evers was. Medgar Evers was assassinated at 37 years old in front of his house as he was walking into his home. He was a civil rights activist, I believe, in Mississippi. Correct me if I'm wrong. Masculinity. And so 37 years old, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, I'm 38. He said Rosa Parks. She wasn't an old lady. She was 42. Masculinity. Isaac Hayes. I don't know who he is. Did you guys see Isaac Hayes on there? All right, you guys know who he is. Masculinity, yes or no? Well, some men thought he was. All right, we'll leave it there. And how about this one? Oh, this one here is just the ultimate. Oh man, come on, that is bad. That is bad, isn't that? Not only knock him down, but then stand over him. You don't mess with Muhammad Ali. Masculine. All right. Now, here it is. Now, let's move over to the Hispanic realm, talking about masculinity among different cultures. All right, don't laugh. But for me, as a Hispanic man from Latin America, this was my view of masculinity growing up. All right, you got that guy who's sweaty and hairy and has chains. And I remember my dad always told me, he says, Jonathan, because my dad has a chest full of hair, right? And he said, Jonathan, if you want to have a chest full of hair just like mine, you got to eat Tabasco sauce. You just got to eat it, and that stuff will put hair on your chest. Well, unfortunately, I must have not eaten enough Tabasco sauce because I just have a little patch, right here. It's quite anemic, and I oftentimes just shave it. It just looks better shaved than just that little whatever that is there. All right. And then the other guy is actually a new guy. He's simply an actor, but he's called the most interesting man in the world. Are you familiar with that? All right. And this one just spoke to me because he's an actor depicting a Hispanic, a Latin man, the most interesting man in the world. If he were to pat you on the back, you would list it on your resume. The most interesting man in the world. And that just speaks to me right here. His words carry weight. Listen to this. His words carry weight that would break a lesser man's jaw. The most interesting man in the world, the Latin man. All right. Now let's move here. This is a scene of current men that are considered perhaps masculine. And maybe the current generation can speak up. But see, that's the problem. I look at these guys and I don't think they're masculine. I mean, I'm being honest with you. I look at these guys. These guys are about the same age that I am. Some are even younger than me. And I'm like, they're not masculine. They're just, muscular. They're not masculine. But it's interesting when you go through the ages or through the eras, how masculinity changes. Can I get a witness? Who says these guys are masculine? Images, I don't know if you've noticed also, is that these images of masculinity, they mainly come from the entertainment world. Did you notice that? or from the sports world. And so I sometimes think, what if we had civic leaders that we looked up to as masculine, or doctors, or scientists, or businessmen, or businesswomen, or educators, or religious leaders, or even philanthropists? But I just find it interesting that the people that we say are masculine mainly come from the entertainment world or from the sports world, but it's not all that different from ancient Greece and Rome, because who did they view as masculine? Hercules and Perseus, and these people aren't even real. Masculinity. What if I show you this picture? Would you say that this is the epitome of masculinity? But look at him. He's a short little guy, skinny, like me, has a little funny mustache. Desmond Doss. There's been two major films that have been made about him. One was a documentary called The Conscientious Objector, and then there was a Hollywood film entitled Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond Doss volunteered to secure the ropes on an escarpment in Okinawa, and that escarpment was 350 feet high. And he volunteered to tie the ropes on that escarpment under enemy fire. During the Battle of Okinawa, he saved the lives of anywhere between 50 to 100 wounded infantrymen atop that area known as Hacksaw Ridge, again under enemy fire. He kept going up, climbing up that escarpment, 350 feet. He would grab a wounded soldier, pull him down, carry him down to safety. Doss was wounded 4 times in Okinawa. He suffered a left arm fracture from a sniper's bullet. At one point, he had 17 pieces of shrapnel embedded in his body. He lost his hearing because of a misapplication of antibiotics. And so later in life, you'll see him with these hearing aids that he had, and he couldn't really speak too well either. Desmond Doss was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in Okinawa. Desmond Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist. And he was a vegetarian, too. That's why he's so skinny. He's a vegetarian. He was opposed to carrying firearms. This, my friends, is masculinity at its finest. And so when we speak about masculinity, it's more than just the outward appearance. True masculinity is about internal qualities, about internal values and internal characteristics. And I want to show a list here on the screen of what those characteristics of masculinity could look like. And let me see if you agree with this list here. And maybe even shout out some more if they're not up there. Grit. How many of you say that? Someone who is masculine has grit, right? They don't give up, right? They persevere. How about strength? And I don't just mean physical strength, right? But the ability to do the right thing, the strength to do the right thing. How many of you would say amen to that? Amen. Courage. Should men be cowards? No, right? A coward is not viewed as a masculine person. In fact, there's a Bible text in Revelation. And the Bible tells us that in Revelation, I think it's Revelation 22, where it says that the people who stand outside of the New Jerusalem, one of the characteristics is that they are cowards. They are not courageous, they are cowards. How about masculinity being responsible? Is that a quality of masculinity? Responsibility? Honor? Chivalry? That one actually came from my wife. I asked her, and she says, John, it's simple. She said, Jonathan, it's simple. As women, all we want is for men to treat us right. Can I get a witness there? And I was like, is that all it takes, really? Is that the secret? I said, Jonathan, we just want men to treat us right. Chivalry, integrity, dependability, valor, and being, I think she probably should have said industrious. Is that right? Yeah, industrious. He's a hard worker. He's tough, maybe a little bit of grit. He has conviction, a man of conviction. How many of you would agree with this list here? And are there other qualities, characteristics that you would add to this? Now, when I speak about masculinity, I don't want you guys to confuse this with what some people have termed toxic masculinity. And what we mean by toxic masculinity is that chauvinism, right? That chauvinism of, of grabbing people wherever they want to, right? All right? Selfishness, of abuse, or of pride, or of arrogance. And when I mean abuse, sexual abuse and physical abuse and verbal abuse, that is toxic masculinity, that arrogance, that pride. Someone said humility, right? Humility. You don't necessarily have to show off what you are, right? Because you're confident in who you are. So we're not talking about toxic masculinity, names that have come up in the news lately. Weinstein and Epstein, right? People who abuse others, who use their position of authority to use and abuse women and use and abuse children. We're not talking about toxic masculinity. We're speaking about true biblical masculinity. And look at this quote here. It's from the book Education. Ellen White wrote about that. The greatest want in the world. What's the greatest want in the world? Greatest want in the world is the want of. Now, let me hear that again. Men. Let's hear that again. Men. What kind of men? Men who will not be bought or sold. That's right. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as a needle to the pole. She was like on a roll here. Do you guys notice that? Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens fall. How many of you say amen to that? The greatest want in the world are the want of men. But then she continues and she says, but such a character is not the result of accident. It's not due to special favors or endowments of providence. A noble character is the result of self-discipline and of the subjection of the lower to the higher nature, the surrender of self for the service of love to God and to man. And I think that's just such a powerful quote there as we think about masculinity. And so I've shared all this because I've noticed there's some research being done where they call it and they say that there is a crisis among men. Have you heard about it? Have you heard of that? A crisis among men. There is a crisis among boys. Have you heard of this crisis? The crisis is, will the real men stand up? Where are the men? Now, if we do a survey here, I don't want to necessarily put anybody on the spot here, but can someone count how many men we have in here today? How many men do we have in here? Who wants to count how many men we have in here? Well, so someone do the count. I'll let you count, and then get back to me when you have that count. Now, what typically happens is the trend tends to be that when you go to church, there's more women in church than there is men in church. Or wives will come by themselves to church, and their husbands won't be with them. It didn't always used to be this way. And maybe we need to find balance somewhere. It used to be where the only people who came to church were men, and the women stayed at home. All right, now I think it's good for women to be here. I think it's good that we're a church where families worship together. I think that's the ideal, but it seems like the pendulum keeps being swung in one direction or another, but not just in church. It seems that men have taken a passive role in the family and in society, and filling that void are women. And I don't know if this is fair or not, but how many of you have seen this meme? Let's look at this meme right here. All right, so a father is speaking to his son in 2018. All right, so the father is speaking to his son in 2018, and he's saying, son, in 2018, I found a picture of your grandfather, right? So this father gets a picture of his father, and ideally that father would, been alive during the 1940s, right? And so that father says, look at your grandfather. When he was 18 years old, he was storming the beaches of Normandy, right? He was riding that motorcycle. He was killing Nazis, all right, something like that. He was fighting for his country. For freedom and for liberty. Your grandpa in the 1940s and the 1950s was doing that. All right, now we fast forward to the year 2060. How old am I going to be in 2016? Let me see here. I'm 30. Am I still going to be alive in 2016? I don't know. How old is my son going to be in 2016? I think he's going to be 32. All right, my son's going to be 32 in 1960. And so he's going to say to his son, son, I found a picture of your grandfather in 2018. Right? And he has these doggy faces on there, right? Now, what I want to say about this is that this may not be fair, right? Because it's very possible that this 1940s motorcycle riding grandfather, right, that he also liked puppies, right? It's very possible that he also liked dogs, right? It's very possible that he wasn't always on the task fighting for freedom, right? It's possible that this grandfather had tender moments or had silly moments, right? Maybe the difference is we just didn't capture it because we didn't have the ability to capture those silly moments, whereas today we can capture all the silly moments that we want today, right? So maybe it's not fair. Maybe we need to be careful. We don't want to judge that younger generation, but maybe there's something to that, though, do you think? Maybe do you think that there's been a shift in the concept of masculinity in our present-day society? Could it be possible? Yes or no? Yes or no? And so then, I look at this guy here, right? And we want to be careful not to judge, right? But at least my generation, we make fun of those skinny jeans, right? And then one of these days, you're going to see me wearing skinny jeans here up on the platform, right? Now, we make fun of the spiky hair, and yet, I got the spiky hair going on, kind of, right? So that's why I got to shave my head and go bald. And grow out a beard, right? We want to be careful, but it seems that there's a generational shift in the concept of masculinity. And some research has been done, and they're saying that men are becoming effeminate, that men are becoming androgynous. There's less of a definition today of what constitutes true masculinity. The boundary today for what is masculine is not as defined as it once was. Do we have some agreement here? Can we get an amen here? The boundary that defines masculinity has changed. The line has moved. And so I heard some things where it said, compassionate, right? Masculine, compassionate, right? And I think so, right? I think men should be compassionate. But that's not the first quality that I think of when I think of masculinity. You see where I'm going? There's probably a balance here somewhere. The line has moved. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? All right, to be fair, fashion is relative to the time. They were wearing togas back then. Now they're wearing skinny jeans and glasses, non-prescription glasses, right? Just to look cool. Have you guys seen that? Some of them don't even have lenses in there because it's just about fashion, right? Okay, and there's nothing wrong with being fashionable. I like to be fashionable, but what I want to know though is we don't want to judge this guy, but if this guy though is a hard worker, if he's actually going to, say, his shop, right, and is working and is building something with his hands, or he's a responsible person, then it's all right to be a little bit fashionable, right? But what these images sometimes depict is a lack of masculinity, a lack of the internal qualities and characteristics of masculinity. And so studies are indicating that boys are struggling with motivation today. Boys are struggling with a lack of desire, a lack of ambition. Boys in school are struggling with their grades. I don't know. Tell me, this is what you're hearing as well. Boys are being diagnosed at higher rates with ADHD. Boys are being diagnosed with higher rates of depression. Suicide rates, they say, of young boys is much higher. Teenage boys is much higher than it is for girls. What's happening to our boys? What's happening to our men? They're saying that boys are becoming addicted to video games. Have you heard that one there? Being addicted to video games. All right, now this is just a little anecdotal story. I don't know how much of truth there is in this, but a young adult shared this with me, and she says, Jonathan, there's no. She's 21. She's 21 years old, and she says, Jonathan, there's no guys. And so she's telling me, she's like, there's no guys on the campus. And so I was talking to one of the few guys that was there, and he said, no, there's tons of guys here. The problem is they're all in their dorm rooms playing video games. And they only come outside to go to classes, and then they go right back to their room. They don't even go to the cafeteria anymore. They just grab a lunch and then take it to their rooms to continue playing video games in their room. And so, this is a live-in university, and you have social events, and they're not even socializing anymore. The guys aren't even socializing anymore. They're just in their rooms playing video games. Like I said, this is just a story, an anecdotal story, but could there be some truth? Could there be some truth to that? Some people say that they're seeing a link between these problems with boys to the increase of the absence of male figures, adult male figures in the home. And so what they say is, I read this headline the other day, and it said, we have come to, evidence suggests, this is a good one, evidence suggests that male figures are important in the home. Isn't that a breakthrough? right? I just saw that headline. The evidence suggests that a male figure is important in the home. And so the idea is that when societies become prosperous, when societies become wealthy, when societies become affluent, when societies are at ease, divorce rates, they spike. And so what that means now is that there is a larger number of single homes that are in the rise. Primarily single homes made up of single mothers raising their children, their boys and their girls. And so boys from an earlier age, now this is going to be a little controversial here. This is, all right, I'm just repeating, this isn't me. This is just what this person was writing. And so what we're seeing is that boys are now being raised primarily by their mothers. And as a result, we are seeing the emasculation of boys from an early age. Is that a tough statement? Mothers, help me out here. Is that a tough statement? Is that too harsh? The emasculation of boys by their mothers, And now it's good, right? Mothers are nurturing, mothers are caring, mothers are good. You look at my wife, and she just loves my little son, and she's like, "Oh, come here, you're mommy's little, son or whatever." And yesterday she was asking him, "Who's mommy's Valentine?" And he was doing, "Who's mommy's Valentine?" All right, so they love that. That's good. Mothers, they just nurture them and feed them and just take care of them and just love them, right? That's good. But studies indicate that boys, they also need to suffer. Boys need to suffer. Men, watch out, men need to suffer. Now that's interesting because in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 3, God says, by the sweat of your brow, thorns and thistles you will eat, the fruit of the ground. All the days of your life, there's something about suffering for men. That men need to suffer, that boys need to suffer. There's something about struggling. And so what happens is the father comes home and he wants to take his son outside to do something manly or masculine. I don't know if you've seen this or not, or if you heard about this or not. He wants to take the son outside. "Oh no," says the mother, "it's too cold outside. Oh no, he's going to get cold. Oh no, he hasn't eaten his food yet. Oh no, it's too dangerous. Oh no, we were going shopping. We had plans to go shopping." And so because we as men have the tendency to be passive, that is, we don't want to get into an argument with our spouse, so what some men will do in this scenario is that we'll just back off, and we'll say, "All right, that's fine," and we'll leave our sons in the care of their mothers. But what we're actually doing is we are harming our son, and we are harming ourselves. Because what we're teaching our sons is that it's okay to be passive, when instead we should be modeling to our sons how to be assertive. And assertiveness, I don't want to necessarily go on a tangent about what assertiveness is, but assertiveness, just briefly, is the ability to clearly express what one wants, what one feels, and what one needs. Now, don't confuse assertiveness with aggression or obstinacy or willfulness. That would be something like, "No, that's my son, and we're going to go and do this because he's my son, and we're going to do it no matter what, and I don't care what you say, we're going to do it." No. Assertiveness in relationships is healthy. It's healthy in relationships to clearly be able to express what I like, what I don't like, what I want, what I don't want. That's very important. Aggression and obstinacy or inflexibility is toxic. And so we have this scenario, and so what we want to do is we want to look to compromise. If it is that the mother wants to do something else with the son, well, we look to compromise. We look to come to an agreement with our spouse. Well, if he hasn't eaten, if our son hasn't eaten, well, let's make sure he eats. If it is cold outside, let's make sure we dress him warm. If it's warm outside or hot outside, let's make sure we dress him cool. But once we agree with our spouse, then we proceed to spend time with our son. And mothers, please don't oppose it, but rather encourage it. And fathers, please don't become passive in your relationships with your children. Be assertive. Spend time with them. Now, I think about my mom, and I think about my mom, and I think about my dad, and if it was up for my mom, they say I'm 38 years old, I would still be living at home with my mom right now. It was up to my mom. You know, and in fact, right now, if I said, Mom, you know, I'm coming home, she says, come home, son. Here's your room, and here's your bed, and don't worry, I'll make your bed for you, and I'll feed you, and you just sit down at the table. I'll bring your food to you and your plate, and you don't even have to pick up your plate. I'll pick it up for you, and I'll wash it for you, and that's my mom. And thank God for my dad. All right, thank God for my dad, all right? And I say that because my mom and her sisters, that's actually what has happened to my cousins. They're still my age or older, still living at home and living at home with their girlfriends sometimes. Mom's taking care of them, and it's okay because he's my little boy. I remember my dad. Thank God for my dad. I remember my dad. And when I think about masculine, I think about my dad. My dad, I would be standing there as a teenager. I'd be standing there like this. And my dad would be like, Jonathan, get your hands out of your pocket. Get your hands out of your pocket, Jonathan. And then sometimes I'd have my sleeves up like this. You know, I don't know, I had shirts that wouldn't fit back then. I had my hands in here, and I'd kind of be like this. And he's like, Jonathan, take your hands out of your sleeves. Get your hands out of there. Take initiative, Jonathan, initiative. If you see a little piece of paper on the floor, go and pick it up. Jonathan, initiative, assertiveness. Don't wait to be asked to do something, Jonathan. Make yourself useful. Open your mouth. Open your mouth, Jonathan. Pronounce your words. Speak up. Stand up straight. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Look, see, look, straight. You know, do it again. That's actually my uncle. You guys have met my uncle. He's come here a couple times. My uncle. We spent a summer with my uncle, and he made us do chores that summer. Can you believe that? He made us do chores. It was supposed to be summer vacation. He made us do chores, and so my chore was to clean the bathroom. And my uncle would go to work during the day. He would come back, and he would do an inspection. And, you know, I cleaned the bathroom. And then he would go, and he would look behind the bathroom, behind the toilet, right behind the toilet. I was like, yeah, Uncle, I cleaned the toilet bowl. It's all clean. And he'd go behind the toilet, underneath the toilet, where no one can see anything. And it'd be like, look, clean it again. But, Uncle, nobody sees that. You know, and I was so upset at that, you know, and after that summer, I was complaining about my uncle, you know, my dad, Jonathan, put some oomph in it. Put your body into it. You know, I'd mop the floor. We don't have a mop here, do we, you know? But I'd mop the floor, you know, and I'd be like, you know, I was 15, 14, I'll just be mopping. Jonathan, grab it, put some oomph into it. Put your body into it. Sweep that floor, mop that floor. I'm thankful for my dad. Even though I still don't consider myself necessarily a masculine person. But I'm thankful for my dad. But again, it's not, you know, it's not the external qualities, right? I mean, I'm like tiny. I'm tiny, right? I wouldn't qualify for a masculine look. I'm tiny. My shoulders are like 36. That's right. That's what that means. Ladies, if you don't know what that means, my shoulder width is like 36. That means I barely made it into the men's section of suits. If I was a 35, I still would have to be buying my suits in the boys section. That's the truth, right? You know, and I'm skinny and I'm little, but it's more than just the outward characteristics. It's about these internal qualities. And so studies are saying that boys need a masculine figure in their life. Daughters also. President Obama said a few years ago, and I've actually read this, I've read this before here, but I just think it's such a powerful quote. President Obama, he said, we know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and to commit crime. Children who grow up without a father. They are 9 times more likely to drop out of school. 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They are more likely to have behavioral problems or to run away from home or to become teenage parents themselves. And the foundations of our community are weaker because of it. He continues and he says, fathers, they teach their sons how to manage masculine aggression in a positive way. If the child is not taught at the age of 5 not to bite, not to yell, not to pull hair, not to hit, if the child is not taught at the age of 5 to control his emotions, how to resolve conflict in a positive way, at 15, they'll continue that same behavior, only with more dire consequences. Fathers, he says, fathers teach their daughters how to find a good husband. Fathers model to their daughters what a good male-female, what a healthy male-female relationship looks like. But if the husband yells in the home, if the husband fights in the home, if the husband argues and hits his wife and his children, then his daughters will not know what a healthy relationship with a boy looks like. Girls who grow up without a father are more likely to experience an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. But when there's a father in the home, he watches over his daughter, and that's how it should be. And I think about some men I met in Michigan, and whenever a boy would come to the house and to take their daughter out, he made sure that was the opportunity he took to set up his table right in front of the front door and start polishing his, his AR-15, start polishing his 9mm, start polishing his 45, and everything else that he had there, his arsenal, right? What are your intentions with my daughter? And that's a very good question. Can I get a witness, fathers? Can I get a witness? I was 15 years old once. I know what your intentions are, right? What are your intentions with my daughter? Marriage, it says, marriage, he continues, marriage when stable, due to the responsible action of the man, is the institution that protects children from poverty. It increases the likelihood that those children will experience social mobility. It protects children from committing crime, but when the home is unstable, it will create psychological, emotional, economic, and academic difficulties for children. And so why are there so many single parents in the homes and mothers raising their sons? It's not because mothers want it that way. Can I get a witness? Mothers, do you want it that way? Wives, do you want it that way? It's not because mothers want it that way. It's unfortunately sometimes because there's a crisis with men. 9 times out of 10, it's not because that's what the mother wants, but rather it's because of the man's, come on, men, help me out here. It's because of the man's irresponsibility. And that's one of the reasons why there's a crisis among the male population. I had a parent once tell me, if I would have known the negative effect of the divorce, the negative effect the divorce would have had on my children, he said, I would have stayed married just for them. Did you guys hear that? I would have stayed married just for them. And so what he's saying here is that marriage becomes more than just a romantic relationship. Marriage is more than just what can I get out of the relationship. It's more than just you meeting my needs. Men, can I get a witness here? It's more than passion. Marriage is more than passion. Marriage is about responsibility. A responsibility that we cannot wash our hands from. A responsibility to our family, to our children. Cannot abdicate because God will hold us responsible for that. Marriage becomes now a relationship about responsibility and a commitment that we cannot just walk away from. And if we do, we are seeing the results in our society today. I surveyed in my last sermon about the effects of divorce. Remember, the greatest generation, the golden generation, they never divorced, right? Then boomers come and they realize, well, maybe I may need to take that step of divorce if my husband or whatever, right? Okay. Then Gen X, then they start, well, we're not even going to marry. We're just going to live together. And then millennials, then they were like, well, why do we even need to marry? And now people, what I'm hearing is now people aren't even getting into relationships anymore. Singleness is a thing. That's what I'm hearing. Singleness is a thing. In fact, there was this, this other article that I read that they said people are actually having, people are having less sex now. People are having less sex now. Why? Because there isn't even a physical relationship. Like people don't have time for it. People don't want it. And because of the rise of technology in digital forms, such as pornography and these kinds of things, it's cheaper. It's easier. There's no commitment. I don't need to leave my house. I don't need to put forth any effort. I'm not saying it's a good thing, all right? But I'm just saying these are the pros. In other words, we're just isolating ourselves. There's no relationship anymore because we've been hurt so much. Experts who at one time were lauding pornography and how great it was and how healthy it was, these same experts are now seeing that instead of promoting healthy sex, it actually destroys sex. And so now the experts are changing their mind on it. And then I just thought about this Bible verse here, Job 31:1. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at women. How about that for wisdom? For wisdom that experts are barely finding out right now. Men, our eyes should only be for one woman, and that is for your wife. All right, now God is not against sex. God is not a prude. In fact, it is God who created us to be sexual beings. In fact, there's an entire book written in the Bible to celebrate the beauty of love and sex in marriage, okay? So again, God is not against sex. He's not opposed to sex. As Christians, we also should not be opposed to sex. Now, I remember some time watching an interview that they were doing, and they were interviewing the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, and if I'm not mistaken, I understand that he was a Christian. I believe his name was Roger Staubach. And they were interviewing him and comparing him or contrasting him to another quarterback of that time by the name of Joe Namath. And he was the quarterback, Joe Namath was a quarterback of the New York Jets. Anybody remember Joe Namath from back in the day, right? Joe Namath. They were saying Joe Namath, I guess he always went out on the town, right? He'd always go on the town. And I remember the Cowboys quarterback, he says, you know what? I like to have sex just as much as Joe Namath. I love it just as much as Joe Namath. And I have it just as much as Joe Namath. The difference is I have it with one woman, and that's my wife. And Joe Namath may think that it's great, having a great time going out on the town. What I think is a great time is getting in my station wagon with my wife, putting my children in the back seat, and going out on a Sunday to the park. That's something. Wisdom here. And so what I want to do is I want men, I want you to, if you can, recommit this morning. Maybe can we put that list of qualities up on the screen again? What I want is, men, I want us to commit to biblical masculinity. Can we do that this morning? I want us to commit once again to biblical masculinity. I want you to commit yourselves once again to your families, to your wife, to your spouse, to your children, to your sons, to your daughters. Can we do that, men? What can we do to become better fathers, better men, better husbands? Men, can we recommit ourselves to this? Look at these values. Can we recommit ourselves to these values?
This podcast is brought to you by the Jacksonville First Seventh-day Adventist Church. Connect with us on www.jaxsda.org or on Facebook and YouTube. We look forward to sharing more inspiring messages with you.